All right, so we are now recording, and we should be live in the group here in any second. As soon as we're live in the group, we'll do our little patented intro, which I think we should be live now. All right, we are. What's going on, everyone? Hope you're doing well. You know the drill. We are here for the Get More Clients show. Hope you've had an awesome day thus far and a great week. Thanks so much for joining us as usual. If you are live and this is your first time seeing this video, the Get More Clients show is a podcast that Brian and I do. It's not an interactive live show, although we'll of course answer any questions you might have on the live itself. You can also watch our show on YouTube and any clips on our other YouTube channel, which we'll drop the links for you in our group. But we'll be starting off the intro here in just a minute. If you are watching live, do us a quick favor, hit that like button and love button. Let us know you're here. We're going to share Milestone war stories today. And should be really good, and we're really looking forward to it. So thanks so much for being here. We're going to start in 3, 2, 1. What is going on? Alex Shinsky here for the Get More Client Show, episode number 6. So excited to be here with you, as always, joined by the great, the venerable Brian Downard. Brian, how you doing, man?
Oh, that's me. I'm doing good. I'm pumped. I love this show, man. I'm so happy we committed to the consistency of doing this, bringing the people the content they need to grow is what really gets me excited.
I love it.
And I like just talking to you because we match without even trying.
Yeah, except my green's a little nicer today, but that's okay. We won't judge you on it. We're going to talk today about the frontline war stories about building our businesses. And share with you some of the most valuable lessons we can kind of conjure up from our specific milestones that you've probably either been or you want to get to. And we'll share what we've seen as transparent as we possibly can, sharing all the dirty details with you, the good, the bad, the ugly, the otherwise. And I think you'll have a lot of fun with it, and I think you'll learn a ton. So as always, please feel free, if you are watching on YouTube, to subscribe. If you are listening on your favorite podcast provider, always feel free to drop us a review. We would always appreciate it. You can catch the clip show on our YouTube channel as well. So if you just want the bite-sized pieces of the best parts of these shows, you can catch those. And if you can't find them, just ask us on Facebook or wherever you can find us. We'll be more than happy to let you know. Brian, let's talk a little bit about our milestones and what this show is all about. I think the thing I want to start off with here is the most important start for any business, which is the end goal in mind. How are you building a business, right, to achieve your goals? How did you identify what niche you wanted to go into, what offer you wanted to make? How did that whole process start for you, Brian?
Do you want to dive right in, or do you want to sort of tease a little bit about what we're going to be talking about throughout the show?
Sure, you can tease them. I'm open to it.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to tease away. So the first thing, like Alex is saying, I'm going to talk a little bit about finding your niche and your zone of genius. I'm going to talk about getting your first client, losing your first client, our experience with that. Biggest failure, your first really big failure that kind of made you question whether or not you wanted to be an entrepreneur or marketer. Making first 10K, making your first $1 million run rate, hiring, firing first team members, and then running your first live event. So lots of cool topics we're going to talk about. But yeah, like I said, let's start at the top where we're going to be discussing finding your niche. And one sort of goofy side note, as I'm saying goofy side note, about to tell myself to not be so emphatic with my hands, I'm going to try and keep my hands down my sides, in my pockets today, so I'm not waving them at you like I'm in The Sopranos. I just had to bring that up because Alex finished it last night.
Finished the season last night, the series, unbelievable. I'm only 12 years behind, but yeah, it was pretty great.
So without further ado, let's get into it and talk about finding that niche. Now, this is such an interesting topic to me because we work with dozens and dozens of agency owners, and a lot of them, as some of the ones who are just starting, really have that question around what niche should I go into? And a lot of times they want us to sort of just tell them which niche they should choose. So before I sort of tell you my story about how I got into the one that I ultimately specialized in, which was patio furniture for my agency, I want to explain to you my thought process about how to pick a niche. I feel like there needs to be this intersection of what you actually enjoy and or are good at, where you kind of have that background or knowledge. There needs to be a place where you actually care about, you're passionate about it, that gets you excited and you're actually interested in that. Otherwise, working with clients in that space is going to be painful. You're not going to like it. You're going to hate your job and the business you created. Not fun. And also at the intersection of where you already have connections. Where do you have a place where you can tap on the shoulder of someone who likes, trusts, and knows you to either work with them first or be referred to someone that they know. I know that's part of Alex's story, so I won't spoil that for you guys. But really, if we go to the actual story of how this happened for me and how I found that niche would be, it was a college friend. Now, this was actually already a few months into my, not a few months, probably a few years into my agency journey where we were making iPhone apps. And frankly, we were making them for anyone and everyone who would pay us. Women's clothing stores, women's shoe stores, pizza shops, hotels, random restaurants. So like, it was not an ideal setup because we were just taking anything and everyone that would come our way. So the interesting story here is this college friend of mine, shout out Carlos, if you're ever watching or listening to this, also one of the groomsmen in my wedding, so a good long-term friend as well, actually introduced me to his family's business. They owned a patio furniture store in my hometown where I grew up. I'd always known of that business, but never considered that to be the niche I would want to ultimately pursue. We actually ended up going in there and trying to pitch them an iPhone app because at the time that's what that we were doing. And they really didn't have any interest. They didn't see the benefit or need for that. So I started to dig a little deeper, doing market research to figure out what they actually did need. So I learned they needed more consistent leads for their sales team and an updated website. So I started, at that point was actually where I started to change my offers and start to realize, Alex, you say this all the time, you can't create demand, you have to supply it, right? So I was trying to create demand for something that wasn't really needed instead of hearing what they needed and wanted and designing my offers around that. So I really stumbled into the niche that I ultimately went into long term by taking consistent action in any direction. And I think that's the big lesson I want you to take away from what I'm expressing here.
Absolutely.
You need to start moving in a direction because that path, as you take it, other paths, other doors, other opportunities will be revealed on your journey by the simple act of moving in that direction.
Yeah.
I would never have been able to have the skills needed to go ultimately sell this service or learn this service or pick this niche if I wasn't already doing things in the marketing space, if I didn't have an offer that was imperfect that I made and put it out there and couldn't sell, that if I wasn't having experience working with other types of businesses that allowed me to have the confidence to go tell them, even though I haven't worked with a patio furniture business yet, I'm really confident we can work with you. So I ultimately stumbled into my zone of genius for my agency and my niche by just simply taking action and seeing which doors were open and revealed to me along that path. And I think that's the most important thing a lot of you need to do. Pick a direction, start heading in it, and then see what opportunities come your way. It's one of the best ways you can decide what to do, and ultimately you find things you are passionate about you didn't realize you would be passionate about. So I'm not going to go too much deeper on this one. We got a number of other stories to talk about here today, but Alex, I'm going to kick it over to you. I'd love to know about how you found and stumbled into your niche for your agency.
Yeah, I think in so many words, to be very eloquent today, I fell ass backwards into my niche. I know that was like very beautifully stated, right? I really didn't expect this would happen. I think just for a little bit of background, I went to college to become a clinical psychologist. And anyone that knows me might have just had a big light bulb of like, oh, that's why Alex is like that. Yeah, that's exactly why I'm like that. I realized pretty soon after college that I didn't actually want to do that, which is an entirely different story itself if one day we want to touch on that. But I needed to just start creating opportunities for myself because I knew that I had to be my own boss. I didn't really have any thought process of either going back to school for a master's degree or getting a job that I didn't like. It was either build my own business or go back to school, and that was not an option. So building my business, I did two things. that I knew really well. One was I already had an actual agency for 4 years without realizing it. I know that sounds insane, but I'll explain how in just a second. And then the alternative was sports. The idea of sports, just for clarity, I'm a big sports fan, big Miami Heat fan, big Miami Dolphins fan. I grew up in a household of, rabid sports fans with my dad and my two brothers. Yelling at the television every Sunday with the Dolphins sucking was very common, or celebrating when Dwayne Wade and the Miami Heat would win championships was also very exciting. When I left college, the first thing I tried to do was get a job with the Miami Dolphins. And I just called them every single day for 2 months straight until they finally agreed to let me become a media member for the Dolphins. The only way I was able to do that was by first sending almost 500 emails to a bunch of different websites on the internet asking if I could write, even writing for free so I can get a byline so that I can go to the Dolphins to say, look, I am an affiliate or a media member for X website. It ended up being Fansided, which is a Sports Illustrated affiliate. You can still go back this day and still read some of my older articles. Probably don't, because they're probably embarrassing and crap. But still, once I was able to do that, I think I realized for the first time an important lesson that my parents were trying to impart on me for a long time. And I think anyone listening to this has probably heard this before, where it's like, you can do anything you set your mind to, right? I used to absolutely hate that notion, because I would be that like cranky teenager where it was like, I can't fly, I can't go to the moon, I can't, conjure up spells. Like, I don't know why my brain would do that, but instead of just focusing on what the actual mission statement of that, lesson is, like that you can do anything that you're willing to put in the time or effort to do, you're willing to persevere through anything, you're willing to push through obstacles. That was the first time I realized I could do anything I wanted, because out of nothing, out of nowhere, my own volition, I was able to become a media member for a Sports Illustrated affiliate in Fansided, and for SB Nation for the UFC, and become an actual media member for the Miami Dolphins. I literally have the media badge over here to my left. And it's just been it was an incredible experience. Besides making no money, which was shitty, this is how I stumbled ass backwards into the niche, because it kind of all came together. 4 years prior, after high school, when I had graduated in 2010, I started working for my next door neighbor, who is an attorney. The reason behind working for this guy was the intention that potentially I would become an attorney down the line. Jews are like kind of big on like potentially becoming an attorney, or like arguing, which I'm good at both of those things. Being a Jew and arguing, those are the two things I was talking about there. So basically what I did was I was writing emails for this guy on Constant Contact, and Facebook had just come out with business pages. This is even before they were running ads to small businesses on Facebook, and he was really ahead of the game. His name was Lloyd Mankus. Fortunately, he passed away a couple years ago. Miss you, my man. Hope you're doing well up there. Lloyd, I'll never forget this. The first time I ever got into his car, Brian, he said, Alex, why do you want to work for me? And I gave him like that, bullshit spiel of like, well, I want to become an attorney one day and support people and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, awesome. My mission for the next 2 months while you're working with me is to make sure you never become an attorney. That was the first thing he ever said to me when I got into his car that had an ashtray with about 75 cigarettes in it, which was really gross, in his small BMW for a dude that was pretty big, which was hilarious. Long story short, to fast forward, when I left working for him and I went to Orlando, I asked him if he knew any other attorneys that I could do this social media posting for, and he gave me about 10 clients. And that's how I made money during college, but I don't think I had the entrepreneurial brain yet. I don't think my brain was fixated on like, wait, I can make actually a good amount of money doing this. It was just always in my brain, in this vessel in my brain, compartmentalized as my side hustle. Whether I was making 5 or 10 or even 15 grand a month, it was just like, damn, I'm a really smart college kid making money, posting on Facebook and doing social media outreach. This is incredible, right? Even when I graduated, even when I realized I wasn't going to become a psychologist, even when I tried to become a media member for the Miami Dolphins, I was still making money from these attorneys and still didn't realize social media marketing was a thing. It didn't happen until the two businesses converged together. And that's when I was a media member for the UFC. I went to a weigh-ins event in Hollywood, Florida, where I'm from. And I met this guy on this application. He was using this application called TweetDeck. which is like a Twitter application that you're allowed to see a whole bunch of like tweets in different formats and mentions. I was like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I'm the social media manager for World Series of Fighting, which is like, if you don't know what MMA is, it's just another organization like the UFC. And when he said social media manager, it blew my mind. For the first time in 4 years, someone else had said the words of what I did for attorneys without me saying, oh, it's just a side hustle. I just post on Facebook for them. He said social media manager. Like, that's his job. This is the card he just gave me. That's what he does. It blew my mind. I ended up meeting him for coffee about a week after that, and he was sharing with me all the things that he does in this digital marketing business back in like 2014. I couldn't believe what he was telling me. And because of that, it spurred me to the opportunity of realizing, wow, I need to stop working in the sports business where I was making $1 per article I was writing, which is insane. It's literally no money at all. And then starting to actually build out a real business with attorneys. And that's actually how I met Brian the first time. Just to put it all together and put a bow on it, Brian and I were both in Dave Rogenmoser's coaching program, because as soon, of course, Brian, as I searched online the first time ever, social media manager, bang, Dave Rogenmoser was blasting me with 100,000 ads alongside Dan Henry and probably Billie Jean and Ty Lopez, I think, back then. Probably missing a couple people, but went with Dave and started building my business for the next 2 years and focused 100% on attorneys. And that's how we stumbled ass backwards into it. It's pretty crazy in retrospect how that ended up happening. But I think the lesson for all of you listening is there's always this grass is greener mindset. Like, oh, the next niche is going to be better and they won't have objections and it will be easier to fulfill and I'll retain them longer and I need to find the right person. I think if you let the work speak for itself, like Brian is talking about, you just create opportunities nonstop, you put in the work and effort, some door will open for you, and that door will be the opportunity that you're looking for to find the path. And I think it's a difficult pill to swallow and a hard lesson to learn, but absolutely necessary and something of immense value.
I love that, and I completely agree. So that was both a little bit long-winded stories. Totally fine. We'll try and keep some of the other stories and lessons a little bit more succinct, but I think that's a super valuable lesson because that's where 99% of people who are wanting to start a business get stuck. And what should I do? The answer is start something, and the answer will be revealed by the simple act of moving forward and taking action. So, Alex, you talked a little bit already about getting your first client. If you want to go a little bit deeper there, that's totally fine. But what I'm going to do is talk about my first client now. My very first client was actually a referral from my dad, of all things.
Hey.
So, yeah, my dad was and still actually is not a financial consultant per se, more of a retail and physical product, like stock in a store consultant. So how much based on the money you're making should you buy? How much product should you have on your shelves? And he had a number of different clients all over the country. To be honest, I love my dad. A little bit of a freelancer himself because he had so many different businesses that he served. But it sort of created a buffet for me, if you will, of potential people that I could work with. So my first company back in high school was making t-shirts, but my first real company was making iPhone apps. So once we actually got the app developed, I went to the people who I knew, who I trusted, and who I knew had connections. Fortunately for me, it was my dad, and he was able to refer me to a little women's shoe store in Las Vegas, Nevada, a Birkenstock store by all things. I don't wear Birkenstocks myself. My feet aren't pretty enough for that. And no amount of pretty sandals will change that. But they were kind enough to take a chance on us. I was able to offer a little bit of a discount, not much. We were charging about $5,000 for our apps at that time, and I initially charged $4,000. And I'm telling you, I can still remember the feeling. I was in the car with my dad. I don't remember why I was off separate from this business thing. And he had actually just been to Vegas to see that client. He picked up the check for me, and he handed me this check, and I opened that up, and that feeling, it was only the deposit, it was only $1,000, but that will stay with me forever. The realization that I can make my own money, I can create value, and at 18 years old, that to me was a massive light bulb that there's I don't have to go rely on someone else to make money for me. And at that point, I was delivering pizzas. It would have taken me 2-3 weeks to get anywhere close to $1,000, probably a month. I honestly don't even remember how much I made per night, maybe like $100 a night, 3 times a week. So yeah, about 3 weeks to make $1,000. This was just, I got to sit behind a computer, do what I love, serve businesses, and it was an incredible feeling. So that was where my first client came from. And I'm going to put a little cherry on top of this. One of the first things we have all of our clients do when they join the program is go through something called the race to revenue. And we can challenge them to go back to your old connections, stale leads, past clients, any religious groups, organizations you're a part of, trade school, graduate schools, country clubs, friends and family. Go start there, because the people who know you, who like you, and who trust you will be able to refer you to people who you don't have to then go earn that trust and likability, because it's transferred to you through the people you know. So start there, because your first client is always the hardest. And when you can have someone who trusts you, puts you in touch with someone who you can serve, that's going to be a game changer and make your life a lot easier instead of going in there cold. So that's my story about my first client, and that feeling. It just puts a smile on my face, just looking back and thinking back to that feeling of getting that first check. So, Alex, I know you mentioned a little bit about your first client. Anything else you wanted to share around that?
I would just say the idea of this model where like everyone wants to start with a head start. Everyone like wants to have 10 clients to start. It's like, how do I do this without any testimonials, without any proof? How do I build a business? It's like you're so focused on what everyone else is doing and how far ahead they are because they have a certain a deck of cards that was dealt to them in their life, personally and professionally, and you're trying to like measure up to them. We spoke about this in the last episode, so I won't bring it up too much, but like competition is like the thief of joy. Like comparison is the thief of joy. Like Brian and my stories are so different, and it has nothing to do with whether or not your dad referred you, or we worked the process to create an opportunity, or it was a next door neighbor, or you just met someone at the local bodega and sparked up a conversation. I think the key is like everyone starts at 1, and I think that's really valuable. Everyone starts technically at 0 to get to 1, but you can't start with just 5. You can't start with 10. You just have to feel comfortable knowing that there is a starting point, and that's going to be your first client. And with that being said, I think that it's a great transition, to talking about losing your first client and having that kind of first big failure, mistake, error process. It's pretty challenging, just as much as Brian is kind of burned into his memory, the idea of this like first paycheck that he got. Burned into my memory is my first big failure, and I think a lot of people will resonate with this. It was so incredibly frustrating because I knew that I could have been better, and I still effed up. So about 2 years after I graduated college, we were doing pretty well in the agency, but I still wasn't focused on just one niche. I was generating a lot of business with attorneys, but I was under the impression of why not try to just make as much money from other businesses as possible, which I know a lot of you are in. We've spoken about this before, about trying to create something repeatable and predictable, and you can't do that if you're working with a bunch of people. But at that time,
Frankenstein.
Yeah, exactly, Frankenstein agency. I was still stuck in this model or process of like make as much money as possible. It's kind of like having a fishing reel on your back, and there's like $1 dangling in front of you, and you're like desperately always trying to catch it. And every once in a while, you grab it, but most of the time you're just chasing it. That's what it felt like. And I'll never forget this. I worked with a gym in Vero Beach, Florida, where Cher and I lived for a little bit. Funny side note, the average age of people in Vero Beach is 60 plus. So Cher and I shouldn't have been there.
I got a better metaphor for you too than the fishhook one.
Tell me.
It's like the money machines that that you get inside of it and they spits up money. You're supposed to grab as many dollar bills as you can, but it's all in different currencies. That's
God.
what not picking a niche is like. Is you're just grabbing different currencies and different money, and you're like, oh wait, I got a few pesos, a few dinars, and wait, what the fuck do I do with this now?
So just side note, could you only come up with 2 right there? Is that why you did that?
That's all I have. I don't even know if the dinar is.
I got you, bro. You could throw in a shekel in there.
A yen.
A rupee. Boom. There we go. Now we got 4.
There we go.
So coming back to the Vero Beach story, this was my first big failure and first big lesson of losing a client, and it was challenging. We had this client in Vero Beach. They had a giant gym, really cool place for like pickleball and racquetball and a standard gym and classes and yoga and sauna and all this great stuff in a small city. And it was really easy to run ads for them. I believe at that time I was still running ads, which in retrospect, what a joke, because I was terrible at that. But I was running the ads for them. And I remember at the end of the month feeling so excited to walk in for the renewal conversation because we had made a promise to them that we were going to generate them at least 50 leads that would download this voucher for, I think it was a 3-day trial to come to the gym and like use the tools and stuff that they had there. Basically what happened was I went in there and we had generated them over 100 people that requested the voucher. And I was so stoked to go in there and be like, this is what we did and we crushed it for you and you only spent this amount and here was the cost per lead. And I was so excited and they're like, yeah, we're not gonna move forward with you for next month. And I was like, what? What's going on? And they're like, well, we had all these people download the voucher, but no one came in. We didn't have one person come in. No one bought anything from us and we wasted all this money. In fact, we would like a refund. And I was just flabbergasted. I can't remember how much they paid me. I think it was probably like $1,500, and I probably took like $750 or $1,000 or so, and I just couldn't believe it. One, I was like, definitely not going to refund you. That was my first reaction, which shouldn't have been my first reaction, because then they were extremely pissed. I should have been fighting for my clarity on like, this was my initial promise, and this is what we delivered. And at the end of the day, what I realized is something that I needed to learn in order to be able to grow long term. And I think a lot of you listening have probably been in this here before. Clients don't care about leads. We're way beyond the idea of just generating leads as being enough. You have to also provide them with a solution that turns leads into clients. We call this a conversion supported offer. Now, there's tools like Go High Level that can help you with this with automations. You can hire an ISA team, like an individual sales agent to call for them. But I didn't do any of that. I thought the job was done because people had simply got the voucher, and I thought that was going to allow me to retain the client. I lost the client. They ended up charging us back. We ended up losing the chargeback, which was another lesson because I didn't have a service level agreement or any kind of proof that they had paid us for a service that I promised to do because we shook hands and did it in person. So it was pretty devastating at that time. I was not making even, I think, like $15,000 a month. At that point, I think it was probably like 12-ish maybe. So it was pretty devastating, very challenging time. In retrospect though, an extremely valuable lesson and something that took a long time to heal from, I think emotionally, because I'm a pretty emotional person, but it was a worthwhile lesson in retrospect.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm going to share mine. Not as painful as a chargeback, that's for sure. Still very sobering though, and I'm going to skip past a couple of the actual first clients that I lost, because when we were making iPhone apps, after the iPhone apps were built, we only were charging like $50 a month to manage it after the fact, which was stupid in retrospect. Yes. In comparison to how much freaking effort and work it takes to keep an app updated or make changes when the client requests. Like we were stumbling forward for sure to figure these things out. We lost a few of those, but those weren't as painful. It's like, oh, $50 a month. Okay, big deal. But the first big client I really lost, and my first big failure and lesson, was a client called Patiolo. If you go search for them right now, you can actually find them. I did a quick search. They have still a Houzz account, a Pinterest account, a Twitter account, some of those things that never got deleted. And it was in the patio furniture industry, so I had niched down, right? I had picked, okay, this is going to be the niche I'm going to. I had great results for other retailers, brick and mortar stores that I had been working with. So I had an opportunity come across my desk that was someone who extremely successful in the manufacturing space. They were making patio umbrellas, $100 million business, which is crazy to think about, making patio umbrellas. They wanted to start an e-com business, an e-com brand, but they were starting from absolute zero and competing with a lot of the pretty much established big names in the industry already. And I thought that I would be capable of taking them from zero to profitable. Now, the first big lesson here I want you to take away from this is, unless you are a freaking pro at marketing, like you just know your shit inside and out, it is very, very difficult By the way, I'm talking about like the people who Silicon Valley VCs pluck to go do marketing for new businesses. Like, unless you're that person, taking a startup from zero to profitable is so damn hard. And the biggest part is their offer is typically not validated, or maybe what they sell, the product or services they sell, are being sold successfully by someone else, but their model in which that they sell it has not been proven yet. And getting them from zero to over that line and up the mountain is like that Greek story of the guy who consistently is pushing the boulder up the hill, and when he gets to the top, it rolls back down. I don't want to try and say his name because I don't know how to say it. It's hard to say. But that Greek story is how this felt, because every time we made a little bit of progress, the ball rolled back down the hill. Now, here's the big failure in the lesson. This was why I was excited about this project. Was heavily funded. They had an investor who had put already, by the time we got to work with them, $100,000 into the company, and they hadn't made a dollar yet. So already a red flag right there. But we had decided, based on all the things that they needed us to do, build the site, manage the marketing, just do the whole thing. We were charging $5,000 per month. And at that time, that was the biggest client that I had. It was incredible. Like, I stopped doing pretty much everything else for almost 3-4 months just to pour all my energy into this one client. Again, don't do that. Putting all your energy into one thing, if you lose that, like I'm about to get to, is very, very painful. So I clearly remember this story. As clear as I can remember getting that first check, I can remember, this was back when I lived in California with my wife, then girlfriend, and it was middle of summer. I was floating in the pool, had my phone, and I was going through my emails. I probably shouldn't have been doing that in my relaxing time. And I got an email from this client basically saying, "We're shutting the business down. Thanks for all your work." Fortunately, there wasn't any chargebacks or anything, but that was so sobering because I felt like I had put in so much effort and energy, and that we were starting to see the progress. Weren't making any sales yet, but starting to see that progress. But like Alex just alluded to, if you're not making money for your clients, they're not going to retain, they're not going to survive, especially a startup who's not making any money at all and is looking at you solely to make all the money for them. That's a very dangerous spot to be in because there's too much of a weight on your shoulders. And again, to get them over that starting line is really difficult. So I can remember that sobering feeling of losing about half of my income from one email, not being able to save it, having to let team members go because of that, and felt these were friends of mine that I had started the business with originally. I had to let them go from the project because there was just no money left, and I had to go scramble to make up that money because I was living outside of my means, right? We had a really nice apartment right by the beach, and all I could think of was, holy shit, how am I going to pay my rent this month? And honestly, that time was a little bit of a blur. I don't remember how I pulled it off. I probably just didn't buy anything or buy groceries for like a month and just go grab any deal that I could. But that was a massive lesson, to not put all my eggs in one basket, not rely so heavily on one person, especially someone who does not have a proven or validated offer.
Yeah,
So,
it's really hard. It's really hard when you have something that is like one of those whale clients, as some of our clients use that terminology, where it's like you have someone that's 30 to 50% of your consistent revenue or more. It's so risky to have a business like that. Obviously, so valuable, but not having anything on the backup, like kind of in the like in the what's the word in the bullpen essentially. It's tough, man. It really hurts. You were talking actually right there about something I wanted to bring up, the next milestone, because I think this is a big milestone, especially for people we work with, going from a freelance business to a team member type of business, meaning like an actual company, so it's not relied on solely upon you. What was it like hiring your first team member? I know it was a friend, but still. And if you want to talk about hiring someone that wasn't a friend, that's fine. But what was it like firing your first team member? I feel like that's such a valuable lesson that you can share.
yeah, so two quick stories about hiring and fire, or just let's start with hiring. First real hire was actually one of my good friends from high school who I had originally started this t-shirt company with. T-shirt company didn't work out. I knew him and trusted him though and said, hey, let's go make iPhone apps. So my first hire was pretty easy because we kind of went in on this company together, and we'd sort of seen it grow over time. But The next hire, then my first, I would say, real hire was many years later after I realized I need to stop doing everything by myself. And I had since fired, I'll talk about that in just a second, this friend of mine. It wasn't really firing. But I had to hire my first VA named Rico out of the Philippines. Shout out Rico. Love this guy. Who actually helped pull up a lot of just do the things that I didn't want to do, the manual tasks, the day-to-day stuff. He was a lifesaver. And again, my first realization that I don't have to do this all by myself and I can trust someone else to take up some of the reins. But kind of switching back to now, my first person I really had to fire was this friend of mine. And I think the biggest lesson that I had from that was not surprising. I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. Not surprising him or having this be like a shock, but always consistent, transparent communication. And not that he saw it coming, but the writing was on the wall, I guess. So yeah, so you could say that he saw it coming because we had communications about like, look, if these certain things don't happen, then there's not a realistic way in which we can continue working together. And unfortunately, that path did start to unfold as I anticipated it. And then we had to have the hard conversation of, hey, I think we just have to go our own separate ways, and you can focus on what you need to. I can focus on what I need to. Now, fortunately, this worked out in everyone's best interest because I was able to go focus on what I'm really good at and wanted to do, which was coaching. And he was able to actually give up marketing because he didn't like marketing at all. He got to go back to school, which he had dropped out of, and got a master's degree in acoustics. So really incredible that he was able to, throw away something that he wasn't passionate about, and I sort of felt that, and go pursue something he genuinely loved doing, and now is very successful at that. So, in the moment, it feels like it's difficult, but those difficulties are what obviously mold us to become the better person we need to be to get to whatever that next step is in our life. But I think the biggest lesson was not just having it be a slap across the face that was instantaneous, but the expectation setting ahead of time so there wasn't that big surprise or anger. And again, this was another friend of mine who was actually in my wedding party, and our friendship is still as good as it ever has been. That moment didn't end the relationship because we both were transparent, had the communication, and were able to discuss it like humans and not animals, I guess, for lack of a better way to say that. So that'd be my lesson around that. Just got to be in constant communication and expectation setting with your teammates. Yeah, Alex, I'm curious to hear about your first big hire and first fire.
Yeah, I would say there's two kind of like first hires. I know that doesn't make sense because you can't have two first, but I'll just explain it. The first hire we ever had was someone like doing small like posting for me on social media and some outreach, like some of the manual tasks. Her name was Sharon, really lovely lady. But like you had mentioned, similar in terms of your stories, like just terrible. I did a terrible job on expectation setting. And because of that, I expected things that were unreasonable, and then wasn't able to back up why I felt she wasn't doing a good enough job when I wanted to move on. And I learned a lot from that because she didn't take it personally, but she expressed like, look, like I can only do the job that you asked me to do. And I can try to go above and beyond, but I can't do something that you magically want done without expressing it. It seems so logical, and yet so many people just don't really give strong expectation setting. So the easiest way to do this, have a job scorecard, put in the expected proficiencies, expected results and KPIs, key performance indicators that you expect them to actually do, right? If you don't do that, otherwise they're not going to be able to do their job efficiently. Their compensation agreement and how you're going to pay them and when you're going to pay them, how you're going to discuss payment agreements like growing their opportunities in the business so that they can actually be able to make more money with you. What they do if they think they don't have the resources available, like having better expectation setting is so key. I would say the most valuable initial team hire that we made, specifically on the agency side, was someone that we plucked from a different agency. Basically, the company that we were doing white label marketing with, we had essentially a project manager, and that project manager was a really incredible person. We connected right away, and as we built the business, I started to realize that if we had a white label company doing our marketing, the actual fulfillment, I really only had a prospecting and sales agency. So I was only able to generate leads for myself and sell deals for myself, but I wasn't actually able to get the results for the clients which is really the key crux of the entire marketing business in the first place. Otherwise, you don't run a business for marketing, you run a sales acquisition agency, which is fine, which is probably what a lot of you out there are listening to and might have a light bulb moment of like, oh my God, that's true. I'm putting all my eggs in one basket for a white label fulfillment team that can change their business model at any time. And we see it all the time with clients, whether it's changing their rates, changing the niches they support, changing their offers, their guarantees, etc. All of those things are out of your control. So what I realized pretty quickly was I need to build the systems for fulfillment, except I don't know how to run ads. I don't know how to do that at all. I don't know how to strategize effectively in marketing. What am I supposed to do? So I asked this person that we were working with as the project manager if she'd be open to working with us if I was able to pay her the salary she was looking for. And I was able to do that. Ended up being just about $10K a month, which was a lot at that time. That was almost 80% of our revenue. But I was already long in the tooth for the agency. This is 2016, 17, and I really did not want to be doing the agency full time anymore. I wanted to be focusing on coaching and speaking and events and maybe go back to sports stuff, which I never did. And that's when I was able to start POD late in 2017 because we hired this person full time. And she still works with us today, which is amazing. I mean, it's incredibly valuable for us. But yeah, it's pretty unbelievable how the process works. In terms of firing someone, that's still to this day an extreme challenge. I'm a super emotional person, so I create like these very close relationships with people. And I think more conventional business wisdom would say like the separation of church and state, like separating the business from personal. And I just feel it's really hard in the day and age that we live in to do that. Maybe I'm not the foremost expert on this. I wouldn't suggest that at all. But even in the last couple of months, we've moved on from certain team members in Sky Social Media or Prospecting on Demand, people that have worked with us for a year or more, people that have provided great value to our community, and it's hard to move on from that. But I think the biggest lesson is the same lesson on the hiring first, which is having immense clarity on expectation setting. But one thing that I've really learned from Brian is not allowing them to dip toes in 40 other things, having them focus on that one thing that their job role is so that they don't get a splayed focus, diverted focus, and diverted energy on a bunch of different things where we make millimeter of progress and then feel like the core reason that we hired you in the first place is not being provided for. And that's really challenging, but a really important lesson long term. And I think that's what I've learned from hiring and firing.
Love it. This is good. I love these stories. Story time is fun.
Story time.
Let's wrap this up. We'll both share briefly about our first 10K months, and then we'll talk a little bit about hitting the $1 million run rate.
Cool.
So for me, first 10K month, I actually was able to get there by referrals. So I got great results for this patio furniture business I was talking about. I was referred to a number of other retailers, manufacturers, a couple of other people sort of adjacent to that industry. So had a flooring store, had an interior designer, a little bit of a random one was like a senior care living center. So I had a bunch of different clients. A couple of them, I'd say 20% of them are outside of my real niche, but I was sort of still just chasing money back then and not being specific. But it's funny, the same thing I'll probably say about hitting the $1 million run rate is you hit the 10K run rate almost by accident. And it's not an accident, but you don't do it by focusing on just the number of 10K. You do it by focusing on getting the results for clients, and then you'll naturally achieve that milestone by, first of all, retaining the clients you have so your income stacks, and second, actually getting referred by those happy clients to more people who you can keep and then retain. But it's so funny. I love going back through my memory of some of these milestones. And it wasn't just the 10K mark that was the big deal for me. It was actually hitting $100,000 in a year. And this was, I think, back in 2015, maybe 14. I remember getting my tax statement back or my tax bill from the accountant. I didn't even realize it, but I had made $100,000 and like $83, like literally just over 100K. I was actually, it's so weird that I have these memories so vivid, but I was just ending a hike back in California, again with my then girlfriend, now wife, and we were ending the hike and I got this email from my tax. I was like, I did it. I hit 100 grand, and it wasn't, again, the main goal that I had. It was great to hit the milestone, but it was a side effect of all the other things that I was doing in my business. So I'm curious, Alex, how did you guys get to that point? I think I know the story, but I want to hear from you anyways.
Yeah, I think I kind of like brought it up slightly earlier on this this podcast. I alluded to it when I had left high school and stopped doing my internship with the attorney. I asked him when I went to Orlando, where I went to school, UCF, University of Central Florida. I asked him if he was still close with anyone from law school that had a law firm in Orlando. And not only did he send me someone in Orlando, he ended up sending me like 10, 20 different attorneys. And there was no sales call. It was like, oh, Lloyd sent you? Cool, awesome. How much am I paying you? You're doing that? Got it. Okay, $1,000? Easy, here, it's done. And it was like instantaneous. And I remember the feeling in the ending of high school, going into college, talking with Shira about what we wanted to do long term. Because we knew we were going to get married. Shira and I were dating in high school, and we were just madly in love and knew we were going to get married. And now as we're filming this podcast, we're days away from having our first kid, which we're super excited about and very grateful for. But I remember talking with her at that time. Neither one of us grew up with a lot of money. It wasn't like, we were dirt poor or anything like that, but it was not extravagant in any way. We had to be very careful about how we spent our money. And we were very, very like money cognizant. Like we were very careful about how we spent our investments and everything like that. And I laugh when I say investments because we didn't have any like playing money. It was like a little bit of cash here and there that our parents would give us. And maybe like having a job as a waiter or waitress. That was kind of like our main thing. I remember before we had gotten the multiple clients, I was telling Cher, like, could you imagine if we can just get like $3,000 to $5,000 every month and we can start like doing these things and taking these trips and like being an adult. There's like this special feeling of ending high school, going into college and like having freedom that you didn't have before. And it's very weird, like leaving your house and having these opportunities. And I realized pretty quickly, like the milestone was right in front of our face and I still wasn't like very cognizant of how this was happening. We had just ended up making $10,000 a month, almost every month for 4 years because of this one client, essentially, this initial client. It was certainly up and down. We had plenty of months that was at like 3K and plenty of months that were at 12 because there was so much pausing and like waiting and holding and cancellations, and it was up and down, but the referral network was so powerful. I think the bigger, more valuable thing that I learned from this model was that hitting 10K didn't mean shit. It didn't do anything for Cher and I. It was great to have the money and we spent it on a bunch of dumb things. I mean, just bluntly and transparently, it's not like I spent it on anything intelligent or invested in it. I didn't know anything about that. And I regret it, frankly, looking back. There's not much regret does for you. It's just I was ignorant. I was extremely, extremely ignorant and didn't know what to do. So I would just like, want to buy a bunch of stuff, just a bunch of random things that I would never use, And in some ways, I still do stupid shit like that, like buying the Oculus, which I've used maybe like 3 times. Why did I buy that? I don't know. I did it. It is what it is. I think our goals, Cher and I at the time, was we just wanted to be able to have money and spend money without feeling bad about it, without buyer's remorse. And I think we used to feel really bad about it. And I thought 10K would do that. It didn't really, and neither did 25 or 50 or the $1 million run rate. What I really realized is like what we started to really care about is our freedom of time, our freedom of finances, and our freedom to do what we want when we want. And that was a really important shift from going from how much money we're making to how much money we want to make to how much money we need to make to achieve the things we want. And that was a really important perspective switch of going from a place of like, I want this for some sense of like desire that's unfounded to I need this because these are the things we're looking for, like want to save up for our wedding, our honeymoon, etc. And that was really important and really valuable to me. And it really changed my life, frankly.
Yeah, you brought up a really important lesson. It's the idea of as you earn more, especially in the beginning stages of your business, it's really easy to personally spend more and see that money as your money when instead it really should be the business's money. And you set a salary you want to pay yourself to live a comfortable lifestyle. It doesn't have to be extravagant. That can come later. But you need to figure out what you need to earn to live comfortably, to be able to focus on the business, have the time freedom to go do that, is you need to be able to reinvest back into the business. One of my...
Before we leave, I want to touch on that for 1 second because this is crazy. I haven't shared this story on this podcast yet. And I don't know if I've told you this personally, Brian, but when Cher and I ended up getting married about 3 years after that, we had planned up and saved for our honeymoon from the job that we had, the agency that we were working. And basically, the honeymoon ended up being in May. Now, what's right before May? April, obviously, is tax season. And I think we didn't really realize how much taxes actually were. And this is directly relevant to what Brian's talking about because it's like, oh, it's our money. It's not your money. It's the business's money. And then half of it or part of it is the government's money. But you don't realize that because they make you pay it later unless you have an intelligent accountant having you pay every month, which we did not at that time. So Shira's uncle, ironically, is an accountant. And I remember calling him in, I think it was March or April of the year that we were going on our honeymoon. And we had saved up probably 6 months at this point, and I think let's just say for the sake of this conversation, it was like $10,000 or $15,000 because we were going on a month-long Euro trip, which is an entirely different story itself, but going to 6 different countries and having this incredible experience. And we were going to hand off the business to someone. And this is the honeymoon from hell, which I've heard. I'm sure if you've seen any of my stuff, you guys have heard this before. But we lost all of our clients when we came back because we thought we had a real business, but didn't. Different story for a different time. The money thing is the key here. But we had planned out, this is how much money we were going to spend. We had already bought non-refundable plane tickets, non-refundable Airbnbs, everything like that. And I remember talking to Cher's uncle, and he's like, yeah, so you're going to owe $8,500 to the government. And I remember like the feeling of a heart attack. You know when like a cop pulls behind you and you're speeding a little bit and you have that sinking heart feeling? You can't recreate that feeling right now. Anyone listening, Brian, you can't do it. We can't forcibly do that. It's like an unconscious thing that happens. And I remember that feeling. And I remember looking at Shira and she was completely pale white and he was on speakerphone. I remember it so vividly like you're talking about. And we were just like, oh my God, like our honeymoon was crumbling in front of our face because we didn't actually understand how much our money was being given away and how much money we actually owned or owed, rather. Thankfully, we were able to still go on the honeymoon because he failed to tell us that day that we can go on a payment plan with the IRS, which is very small percentage. But we didn't know. We thought we had to pay that $8,500 in the next month. And we were like thinking, do we cancel it? Do we try to go like under our means? And it was just a devastating experience. That ended up fine. But I think it's just another good reminder to be good with your money and know those numbers.
Yeah, and that's a little tax hack, not really a hack, but a little known thing where you can do a payment plan over 6 years. So if you are sort of retroactively wishing you would have paid month to month for your taxes, you can end up doing that over 6 years. I wouldn't recommend doing it for that long, but you have the option to sort of retroactively pay it month to month. If you hadn't been, you kind of were a little irresponsible. So last brief story about being irresponsible. I'm still an advocate of, I want you to be able to have the money you need to invest and grow your business. But Alex, you mentioned some of the things you bought you maybe regretted. We lived in California, which is only a 3-hour drive from Vegas. I went to Vegas more times in my early 20s than I probably, like more times in like that 1 or 2 year span, like 21 to 23, than I have since like 23 to 30. Because we were just there. We had money. And every time we get a check, we're like, you guys want to go to Vegas? Yeah, we would go to Vegas like idiots. And those lessons of like learning like to not spend the little money you had for sure stuck with me eventually. But I wouldn't trade those memories because I had such an incredible time just being young and stupid and enjoying the journey, right? Like I think that's the biggest part of it is you have to enjoy the process. Even when you're kicked and you're down, you're not doing it the way you want it to or the way you think you need to. Finding ways to enjoy it and just not regretting it because everything you do and learn will set you up for success on the next thing. So that being said, success on the next thing would be us hitting the $1 million run rate, which we did in 2020. So proud of us for accomplishing that. I think to sort of echo what I said earlier, it was by design in a way. I'll explain that in a second. But it was also not by focusing on hitting $1 million. It was focusing on client success. I am so grateful to work with this community because we really stress and advocate for client success and retention over client acquisition because we give a shit about the people we work with, and the community, my opinion, feels that and knows that, which is why they want to stay in the community and continue working with us, which allows us to stack the number of people we're actually working with. So that is how we got there. Now, the real tangible, tactical way we got there was actually moving away from a 3-month program to a 12-month and basically continuity program where we could keep people not just 90 days at a time, which most agencies do, if you can't retain long term, but figure out an offer that keeps people around long term. Now, nothing can replace just actually getting results. That's the first part. But for you agency owners and you listening, you need to design your offer in a way that retains people long term, which means doing things that get your claws ethically into a business. That could be a white label lead tool where like Go High Level, where they track all of their leads through and they need that to successfully nurture leads. It could be, I don't love websites as a core offer, but we actually have a client, shout out to Claudio, who does free websites as a bonus for when people sign because he knows websites are indefinite. People need that. They're not going to cancel that and they need you to manage it long term. Some of my longest term clients, I had the websites done for. We did other things, but they needed us around for the website. So SEO, another great example where the expectation is 6 months, 12 months is when the results start to come in. So start considering how can you set up your offer to retain clients longer term, which is going to be a renewed focus for us in our community in 2021. But frankly, renewed focus on retention and actually getting clients the results are how, in my opinion, we were able to hit the $1 million run rate last year.
Amen to that. I don't think there's anything else to add there. That's exactly what our focus was, making sure that we can provide a substantial service over 12 months and longer so that we can focus on client success instead of acquisition. And I think that's something a lot of people here should really listen to, focusing on making sure you get your clients the success. I say this and we can end with this. Really important to know, the victory is not getting paid the first time. The victory is getting your clients the results. And when you believe that and internalize that and execute on that, you're going to have a real business, not just an acquisition company that churns clients consistently. Look at how often you are churning your clients and what your average retention is. If you're in the last 2 years averaging your clients paying you less than 5 or 6 times minimum, then you should really be reconsidering your entire strategy for how fulfillment is done. There is ways to keep clients for years long and making sure that they retain and keep paying you over and over. And that's how you really create the time freedom that you're looking for in your business. And that is episode number 6. Thank you so much, as always, for joining us. We really appreciate it. Please, if you are watching on YouTube, hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe. Even if you hate it, if you hit the dislike button, I think it still helps us. So you can do that too. Although it'd be kind of weird if you hated it and you listened this long. That's just my opinion. But regardless, thanks so much, as always, Brian. I'll see you on the next one.
See you, fam.